Have you ever looked at a huge, incredibly diverse country and wondered, how on earth does that hold together? Well, the secret often comes down to this really powerful idea called federalism. And today, we're going to demystify it. We'll break down exactly how this whole power-sharing thing works on the ground.
So, to see why this is so important, let's start with a tale of two countries. Back in 1993, Belgium was facing some serious internal divisions. So they made a choice. They shifted from a centralized system to a federal one, giving real constitutional power to their regions. And you know what? It helped keep the country together. Sri Lanka, on the other hand, stuck with its unitary system, where all the power stays at the top. This decision has been a major source of conflict for decades. So as you can see, the stakes are incredibly high. Okay, so here's our game plan. First, we'll nail down what federalism actually is. Then, we'll look at the two main ways it comes about. After that, we're going to do a deep dive into India as a case study, see how the theory actually works in the real world, and finally, we'll look at how power gets pushed all the way down to the local level. All right, let's jump right into our first section. We saw how Belgium's choice helped hold it together. So, what exactly is federalism? What is this blueprint for sharing power? Okay, so at its very core, federalism is a system that has at least two levels, or tiers, of government. You've got your central government, which handles the big picture stuff for the whole country, and then you have governments at the state or provincial level, and they take care of the day-to-day business in their specific areas. The key thing to remember is that each of these levels has its own power, independent of the other. And you might be surprised by how common this is. Get this. While only about 25 of the world's 193 countries are technically federations, they're home to a massive 40% of the entire global population. That's because most of the world's biggest and most diverse nations, we're talking the US, Canada, Brazil, and India, are all federal. So what makes a country truly federal? Well, think of it like a recipe with some key ingredients. First off, you need those two or more levels of government, and each level has its own specific area of control, its own jurisdiction. Now, this power-sharing deal isn't just a friendly agreement. It's written right into the Constitution. And if you want to change the fundamental rules, both sides have to agree. If they can't agree, well, the courts step in as a neutral umpire. And finally, to make sure they're not just puppets, each level has its own source of money. So now that we know the key features, let's look at how these federations actually get started. Turns out, they're not all born the same way. There are basically two different flavors, what we call coming together federations and holding together federations. On one side, you've got coming together. This is when a bunch of independent states decide to, well, come together to form a bigger country, usually for security and strength. Think of the USA or Australia. In these systems, the states are still really, really powerful, often just as powerful as the central government. Then you have holding together. This is when a big, diverse country decides to divide its own power up between the national government and its regions. It's a way to manage all that diversity. India, Spain, Belgium, they're all great examples. And in this model, the central government usually has a bit more clout. And that's the perfect lead-in to our main case study. Let's take all these ideas and see how the holding together model really works in one of the world's biggest and most complex democracies, India. Now, here's a really interesting little fact. The Indian Constitution never actually uses the word federation. Nope. Instead, it calls India a union of states. But don't let that fool you. The whole system is built on the principles of federalism. It originally set up two tiers of government, the central and the state, and later on, a third tier for local government was added to the mix. And this table shows you exactly how they split up the power. The Constitution has three clear lists. First is the Union list. This covers stuff of national importance, like defense and foreign affairs. Only the central government can make laws on these. Then there's the state list, for things like police and agriculture, which is the state's domain. And then you have the really interesting one, the concurrent list. This has things like education and marriage, where both levels can make laws. But, and this is the important part, if their laws conflict, the central government's law wins. But, you know, a constitution is just a blueprint. The real test of federalism is how it actually works, day in and day out. So let's take a look at how this power sharing has really played out in India's history. So this is where it all started. When India became independent in 1947, the map was, well, it was a mess. A total patchwork of old British provinces and hundreds of princely states. The challenge was massive. How do you forge a single nation out of all this? And now, look at the map today. The change is just staggering. This whole transformation was one of the first and biggest tests for Indian federalism. To make this happen, a lot of old states disappeared and new ones were created.
The main reason? To create linguistic states, making sure that people who spoke the same language all lived in the same state. At the time, a lot of leaders were terrified this would break the country apart. But guess what? It did the exact opposite. And this chart really drives home why that was so important. See, India doesn't have a single majority language. Hindi is the mother tongue for about 44% of the people, which means a majority of Indians speak something else. So instead of forcing one language on everyone, India's leaders were really smart and flexible. They officially recognized 22 scheduled languages, and that move helped them avoid the kind of conflict that tore other places apart. And this quote from the historian Ramachandra Guha just sums it up perfectly. He says that creating states based on language didn't weaken India, it actually made it stronger. It proved that you could be, say, proudly Bengali and proudly Indian at the same time. It was an absolute masterstroke in managing diversity.
Now, the relationship between the central government and the states has definitely had its ups and downs. For a long time after independence, the same political party ruled at both levels. And this old cartoon kind of captures the vibe of that era perfectly. The central government often acted like a bossy parent, stepping on the autonomy of the states, especially if a rival party was in charge.
But then, around 1990, the whole game changed. Strong regional political parties started popping up all over the country. And pretty soon, no single national party could win a majority in parliament by itself. This kicked off the era of coalition governments, which forced the big national parties to make alliances and, well, share power. This created a brand new culture of respecting the states, making federalism in practice stronger than ever before.
But the story doesn't end there. In a country as huge and complex as India, sharing power between the center and the states wasn't enough. True federalism needed to go one level deeper, bringing power directly to the people through something called decentralization.
So what is decentralization? Honestly, the logic is just common sense. There are a ton of problems and issues that are just best solved locally. I mean, the people living in a village know what their village needs better than anyone in a faraway capital, right? And giving them the power to make their own decisions really builds up democratic habits from the ground up.
And this all became official in a huge way back in 1992 with a major constitutional amendment. This was a real game changer. It made it mandatory to hold regular elections for local governments. Critically, it also reserved seats for women and for marginalized communities, which brought millions of new people into the political process. And finally, it required state governments to actually share some of their power and their money with these local bodies. Which brings us to a final thought. When you look at the whole picture, from figuring out language issues to the constant push and pull between the center and the states, it's clear that federalism isn't some fixed set of rules written in stone. It's a living, breathing, dynamic system. So that leaves us with a question. Is federalism a final destination you arrive at, or is it a continuous journey of negotiation and power sharing? Something for you to think about.